Hello everyone, welcome to the session today. We will be talking about integrating language skills. The objectives of the lesson are to get a historical perspective on the segregated skills approach to teaching English, to critically examine the skill-based approaches, to develop an understanding about the linguistic and methodological basis of integrating language skills, to develop an understanding about the content-based and skill-based modes of skill-integrated instruction, and to realize how skills are integrated in discourse-oriented pedagogy. It is assumed that mastery of skills such as speaking and reading is the key to successful learning. But to facilitate the development of language skills is the key issue. Should we go for the segregated skills approach or the integrated skills approach? Skill segregation is reflected in traditional ESL programs that offer classes focusing on segregated language skills. Recall your own experience of learning English. What was the most frequently used activity? Can somebody give an answer to that?
Yeah, there were passages given for us to read. Once we read the passages, we asked comprehension questions to check our understanding of the passage.
Okay. How did the answering of the question take place? Any answers?
We could just say it out or spoken it as we said verbally.
What did you do after giving the oral response? Is there anything else which you did?
Ma'am, maybe first orally and then in written.
That is correct. What other activities did you do? Yes?
There were grammar lessons, the rules were presented, the study of the rules was followed by practice through translations and exercises.
Okay. Anything else? Does anybody remember?
There were few vocabulary items. They were used for the knowing the text better.
Okay. Could you recall how those items were taught?
Yes, ma'am. Before entering the reading passage, some structures and vocabulary items were taught. There were exercises to practice these items.
All right. What were the different types of practice exercises? Does anybody recall that?
We were given for vocabulary, we were asked to write the new words that appeared in the passage, and then we also we were given meanings to it.
Okay. And what about activities for listening and speaking? Do you remember how that went about in your school days?
Ma'am, there were some listening comprehension exercises we were asked to do.
All right. Anything else?
In case of conversation lessons, teacher demonstrated the dialogues and students practiced these by imitating the teacher.
That is right. All these activities which you have just talked about cut across the grammar translation method and the direct method. In the grammar translation method, the focus is chiefly on reading and writing. Very little attention is paid to listening and speaking. But in the direct method, all the 4 language skills are taught from the very beginning. Special emphasis is also placed on speaking. Classes often start with the reading aloud of a specially graded text which introduces the lesson's vocabulary and grammatical structure. Grammar is taught inductively. That is to say, language patterns are presented and practiced by the students themselves. But the rules are not explicitly given to the learners. They learn the rules while the practice is on. The direct method sometimes uses mimes, demonstrations, some form of realia and visual aids to help students understand the grammar and vocabulary better. In the audiolingual method, which is the third method, skills are taught in the natural order of their acquisition. That is, first listening, followed by speaking, reading, and finally on to writing. Audiolingual classes begin with a dialogue which introduces the lesson's sentence patterns. The students memorize the dialogue, then practice grammar patterns in drills such as to listen and repeat, substitution, chain and transformation. Now let us watch this audiolingual class and see what the teacher does. Let us watch the video.
Hello children. Hello ma'am. Shravan, how are you?
How are you?
Thiru, how are you?
How are you?
Next, Rishi, how are you?
How are you?
Okay. You, Shivram, how are you?
How are you?
Not like that. You say after me, okay? How are you?
How are you?
Okay, very good. Now let us sit in a circle, okay? Are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Chalo. It is a bear.
A what?
A bear.
A bear.
Take this. You show to your friend.
A bear. A what? A what? A bear. A bear. A bear. A what? A bear. A bear. A bear. A what? A bear. A bear.
Gautam.
A tiger. A what?
As you have just seen, repetition plays a vital role in this class. See how the chain game is played by the students over here. You must also have noticed that accuracy in pronunciation is emphasized upon and fostered through minimal pair drills, where students learn to differentiate between sounds of such words like ship and sheep, hit and heat, bit and beat. Lessons are sequenced according to the grammatical complexity. Translation, considered to cause interference from the mother tongue, is absolutely not allowed in this kind of classroom. Learning is tightly controlled by the teacher. The student has a very negligible role to play in the process of the classroom, and the teacher follows the text very closely. In the 1950s and 1970s, it was postulated that all four language skills, that is listening, speaking, reading and writing, should be taught, but the spoken skills should be given priority. Real world situational contexts of instruction with lessons built around those specific topics, such as at the post office, at the school, in the marketplace, or a visit to the theatre, served as the basis for the teaching of language. The language taught was taught in chunks, and contextually relevant grammar and vocabulary was used for this particular kind of lesson. The emergence of the situational approach thereafter also gave rise to the classroom teaching technique, which is currently known as PPP. Can anybody give me the full form of the 3 P's?
Yeah, I think it is presentation, practice and production.
That is correct. The PPP model of instruction implies that learners can be guided from controlled practice of language features to free and automatic production of language in any or all 4 of the language skills. By the end of the 1960s, however, many linguists and ELT methodologists arrived at the conclusion that the situational method was somewhat limited in scope, and the focus on speaking and listening alone did not provide a clear principle that could guide the curricula and instruction. This was said by Strevens in 1977. As early as the 1970s, many researchers and methodologists such as Corder, Kaplan and Stern noted that the teaching of language skills cannot be conducted through isolable and discrete structural elements. In reality, it is rare for language skills to be used in isolation. For example, consider a conversation. What are the essential skills involved when you are trying to converse with somebody? Would somebody like to answer? Yes.
I think speaking and listening are the essential skills for conversation.
All right. Somebody else perhaps?
Yes, ma'am. In some context, people read or listen and make notes.
That is correct. The central innovative characteristic of the communicative approach in second or foreign language teaching was the integration of the 4 macro skills and their component parts. Let us examine a typical lesson in a CLT class. Let's look at the screen. Suggest a solution to the problem. A man needs to cross a winding river. He finds 2 planks of about the same length, but neither of them is long enough to stretch across the river. Express the solution in one of the following ways: in words only, in the form of a drawing, in the form of a step-by-step chart. What are the skills required to do this activity appropriately? Any answers? Yes.
Reading comprehension.
Okay. Anything else?
I think writing is necessary.
Well, students can talk about their solutions, which will also cater to the development of the listening and speaking skills. The introduction of the concept of communicative competence by Hymes in 1971 brought about a change in the perspectives on how language skills were to be taught and used for communication both inside and also outside the classroom. Although not directly associated with language teaching, Hymes's work emphasized the key role of the social context in the communication and centrality of the socio-linguistic norms of appropriateness in speech communities and the cultures to which the students belong. Hymes was particularly interested in language as a social behavior. Communicative language teaching, or CLT, places a great deal of value on teaching language skills with the goal of enabling learners to communicate meaningfully both inside and outside the classroom. For example, asking for information, seeking clarification, relying on circumlocution when necessary, and in general negotiating meaning by all linguistic and non-linguistic means at the student's disposal. In their seminal publication on learners' coping strategies, Canal and Swain in 1980s developed a three-component framework of language competence that learners needed to achieve. Those were communicative competence, grammatical competence, and sociolinguistic competence. Widdowson was one of the first linguists to call for integrating the four language skills in instruction to raise learners' proficiency levels and enable advanced language learning. He emphasized that virtually all language uses take place in the form of discourse and in specific social contexts. Although he notes that the separated teaching of language skills is probably more administratively convenient, as in divide and rule, language comprehension and production does not in fact take place in separate ways. Thus, to attain proficiency, learners need to develop a receptive and productive skill in both spoken and written discourses. Widdowson's and Halliday's early work and their insights into the importance of discourse in language usage provided highly influential theoretical foundations in linguistic analysis and language teaching. These works have led to the subsequent rise and prominence of content-based and integrated language instruction, especially in English as a second language in Australia, in the UK, and to some extent even in North America. In contrast to segregated skills instruction, both actual and apparent, there are at least two forms of integrated instruction. Can somebody try and name those?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
There are two types of instructions, that is content based and task based.
That is correct. The first emphasizes learning content through language, while the second stresses doing tasks that require communicative language use. Content-based language instruction is valuable at all levels of language proficiency, but the nature of the content differs according to the proficiency level of the learners. For beginners, the content often involves basic social and interpersonal communication skills. But how do you think the content will be for more advanced learners? For more advanced learners, the content will become increasingly academic and challenging. The cognitive academic language learning approach, that is CALLA, created by Chamot and O'Malley in 1994, shows how language learning strategies can be integrated into the simultaneous learning of content and language. As noted by Scarsella and Oxford in 1992, three general modes of content-based instructions exist: theme-based, adjunct, and sheltered. The theme-based model integrates the language skills into the study of a theme. For example, urban violence, cross-cultural differences in marriage practices, and so on. The theme must be very interesting to the students. Why do you think that the theme should be interesting for students? Yes, would you like to try?
Yes, ma'am. In order to develop the interest in the student, to have a good participation.
That is correct. Also, a wide variety of language skills needs to be practiced, always in the service of communicating about the theme itself. This is most useful and widespread form of content-based instruction in use today. In the adjunct model, language and content courses are taught separately but are carefully coordinated. Why do you think they need to be coordinated? Any answers?
I think we learn language through content, and to know the content better, we should know the vocabulary in order to know the content. So content and language, they go parallel and they should meet together. That's why I think they should be coordinated.
That is correct. In the sheltered model, the subject matter is taught in simplified English tailored to the English students' proficiency level. In task-based instructions, students participate in communicative tasks in English. Tasks are defined as activities that can stand alone as fundamental units and that require comprehending, producing, manipulating, or interacting in authentic language. Attention is principally paid to meaning rather than form, as Noonan has stated in 1989. The task-based model is beginning to influence the measurement of learning strategies, not just the teaching of ESL alone. In task-based instruction, basic pair work and group work are often used to increase students' interaction and collaboration. For instance, students work together to write and edit a class newspaper. They develop a television commercial, enact scenes from a play, or take part in other joint tasks. Tasks-based instruction is relevant at all levels of language proficiency, but the nature of task varies from one level to the other. Tasks become increasingly complex at the higher proficiency levels naturally. The integrated skills approach has clear pedagogical advantage over the segregated skills approach. It exposes English language learners to authentic language and challenges them to interact naturally in the language. Learners rapidly gain a true picture of the richness and complexity of the English language as employed for communication. This approach also stresses that English is not just an object of academic interest nor merely a key to passing an examination. Instead, English becomes a real means of interaction and sharing among people. It also allows teachers to track students' progress in multiple skills at the same time. Integrating the language skills also promotes the learning of real content, not just the dissection of language forms. Finally, the integrated skills approach, whether found in content-based or task-based language instruction or hybrid form, can be highly motivating to students of all ages and backgrounds. We have already seen that theme-based interaction, reading discourse, writing and editing are the various language modules to be transacted. In the modular approach that has been proposed, each module can stand independently, but also can be linked to other modules. Let us have a glance at the major modules. Theme-based interaction, production of an oral discourse, reading protocols, writing a discourse, editing. Let us see how skills are integrated in each of these modules. What are the skills addressed at this stage of classroom interaction? Any answers? Yes.
Theme related ideas are written down on the BB, and students develop graphic organizers such as concept maps, and therefore reading and writing are also addressed.
What do you mean by BB? Can you elaborate?
Blackboard.
That is correct. Yes. Would somebody else like to answer?
Yes, ma'am. The pre-reading session culminates with the production of an oral discourse.
Correct. Now, consider the reading protocols. What are the possibilities of integrating skills? Any responses?
Yes, ma'am. Teacher gives specific instructions for individual reading.
Okay. What else can be done?
Students read individually and share their reading experience.
Okay. What else can we do?
Ma'am, extrapolative questions are posed for generating multiple texts from the given text. At this stage, reading skills are integrated with listening and speaking skills.
Correct. How can we bring in writing at this stage? Any answers?
Yes, ma'am. The learners can write down the answers to the extrapolative questions.
Okay. How are all the 4 skills addressed at the post-reading stage?
The major activity in the post-reading stage is writing of a specific discourse. After writing the discourse, they can individually a few learners can present their work in the classroom in front of their peers.
Okay. What else can be done?
Ma'am, listening and speaking skills are further addressed while the individual learners refine their writing work through collaboration.
Okay. What else can be done? Any other responses?
Yes, ma'am. I think in addition to that, feedback given by the other groups and the facilitator also caters to the development of oral and oral skills. Oral is like listening and oral is speaking.
Correct. What remains now is the editing of the group products. Here also there is scope for integration of all the skills. With this, we come to the end of this session. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you.